2007, 2008-ish is when they got acquired, somewhere around there. So,
And I said, okay, fine, usually.
but he was there on the very first day. I went there on
I know, it's
co-op.
crazy, they're booking wicked quick
Yeah.
recently, I don't know why.
Because I have a
Oh, wow, yeah.
We'll have it on 22nd. It's fine with me.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a slightly delayed start of the February 13th, 2019 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are continuing our series of meetings with department heads. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having our fire chief, John Nuttall, here with us to go over things. We do have one quick, essentially treasurer, but also fire-related update from last week that Russ has.
Yeah.
I think we figured we'd go over first, because it should be quick, but.
Yeah, our treasurer, Sonia Hodge, as a follow-up to last week's meeting, wrote me an email today saying that, I'm just going to read it. She said, "I wanted to update you on the successful sale of our bond anticipation notes for the new fire engine. You may recall I had budgeted a conservative 5% to be paid in the budget we're working on, but we ended up with a rate of 2.29, which is much better than hoped, and it's going to yield a savings of approximately $16,000. So, helps get us there."
That's awesome. Actually, if you just want an update on, from my end of the engine,
Yep.
The engine is complete. It's in Louisiana. Myself and two of my department mechanics are flying down there Sunday to New Orleans to go over the engine. Well, it's still at the factory in case we find any issues. We did the same thing with the tower truck. It was the same company. And they'll repair it on site if we find anything. From that point, they will drive it up to the Northeast as part of breaking in the apparatus, where it goes to our local vendor, which is Specialty Equipment in, like in North Attleboro. They just moved, and they'll complete the lettering, mounting radios and all that. So I'm hoping to have it in service within the month. It's actually early. We thought we were gonna be getting delivery of this in April. So working with Sonia, she had to try to find financing a little sooner to pay for this in March rather than April. So it sounds like it worked out well for everybody involved, so. The engine's coming, it should be here soon. I was down 2 engines today. We're back down to 1. The fleet's old, that's why we're getting a new engine. So it's coming at the right time. It's desperately needed for the town.
How are you flying down there?
Airplane. You're the pilot, so I know. I believe it's American. We're actually flying north into Baton Rouge because I didn't know that Mardi Gras is going on right now.
That's what I just
Oh,
asked.
so the flights must have been like
That's what
insane.
I was just asking you, it's pretty busy.
Which was not on my radar, no pun intended.
That's why your men are down there right now.
It's gonna be interesting. I'll keep close tabs on my firefighters. You guys just want me to jump into this, or unless you have questions first, I'm not sure.
No, I think we can just jump in. If there are any specific things you want to start out with,
Sure.
We can go line by line after that.
Basically, essentially, the entire budget's level service. The only changes in this really are contractual changes. There's slight increases, in some of their hourly rates or a couple of the line items all related to the contract. A lot of it's like education. Is if the firefighters earn additional college credits, that is a small percentage that goes into the base. So that kind of rises everything up, including the overall hourly overtime rate. And I can explain that to you. So it increases slightly, but that increases the overall budget because we are relying heavily on overtime. This question comes up all the time. People should know. I have no problem talking about it. It's actually cheaper to pay overtime than it is to hire more firefighters. As much as I would love to have more firefighters, and I will always ask for more firefighters, it gets more expensive when you start figuring out all of the other benefits, the health benefits, and that package that goes with hiring additional personnel. So when we use overtime, we're really using it on a per diem basis. When there's an absence, we have to maintain 6 firefighters per shift. That's what this entire budget is predicated on. is to maintain 6 firefighters at all times. That also maintains 2 ambulances almost at all times, 99.9% of the time. There may be times when, whether it's storm-related or other issues, I may temporarily put 1 ambulance down, just I gotta maintain fire apparatus as well. For the most part, this budget's to maintain 2 ambulances, which also brings in the ambulance revenue. So it really has been working the last couple of years, I think, but again, just things grow as we go, and that inflates the overall budget.
Not to have you answer questions for
Sure.
the police chief, but we sort of get the exact opposite from the police chief, right? Saying overtime kind of kills that, right, in the last
Not the
argument?
exact opposite. He talked a lot about how their staffing is not fully staffed up to the number of positions they have, which requires a lot of extra overtime.
We were there in the past, we have been there.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
basically my question is, so you guys are basically staffed appropriately, and then the overtime is what sort of fills in when you need it?
Correct. We have in the past, when I took over as chief, we had numerous positions that were not filled, either from attrition or from, we had a number of long-term injuries that were out. So we had a lot of vacancies, and at that point, we were really using a lot of overtime. We actually had to drop the shift level down to reach it. They simply weren't running out of man hours in the budget to do it. So at that point, and that's when I asked, at the time it was, the Board of Selectmen had a hiring freeze in town. This is around 2009, 2010, as you recall, when we were recovering from that. And I asked if I could break that. I said, we desperately need personnel. I need to fill these positions. We need to start diluting the workload, because fewer employees doing the same amount of work is also, you were burning out the employees.
Sure.
So by doing that, we were able to begin hiring some of those vacant positions. We also worked, we had a couple retirements, and then some firefighters came back to work from their sick leave. They were ready to, and we kind of have been growing ever since then. And now we're steady. We really have no vacancies whatsoever. And I'm not anticipating any retirements for next year. It could happen. I do have probably 4 firefighters that could retire now if they wanted to. They're hanging on, which is great, because we have that experience, and it's working. So I don't anticipate any openings next year unless one of them decides they're gonna retire. So we're in good shape.
Thanks.
And so as the
That was my question, basically.
as the comparison with
Yep.
police with overtime, I think the police department is hoping to get to the point where the
Right.
fire department
Exactly, he
is
wants to get
at,
to that point. I get it.
where they do have the full staffing with the number of slotted budgeted
Got it.
positions. That will drop the amount of overtime that they're using.
Yep. I was just thinking these are apples to apples, which are not.
A
Yep.
little bit of different situations.
Got it.
So.
In our overtime, not to kind of dwell on it, but this, I think it's a good explanation, it's needed at this point. The overtime for the fire department, it's kind of used in 3 different areas. There's man-for-man coverage, meaning if somebody goes out sick, vacation, holiday, whatever reason a firefighter is absent from their tour, I need to backfill that position to maintain that level of, we have 6 firefighters on duty at all times. We don't have 7 and drop to 6, we have 6 and maintain 6. Some towns will do that. Your cities usually, they may have 15 firefighters on shift and they drop to 5. That's why they don't have overtime.
Gotcha.
However, they're carrying that many extra people in the benefits, so I would love to be in that position. I don't think that's realistic for Abington at this point. So we maintain, it's very efficient, we maintain 6 at all times. So a good portion of the overtime is simply shift coverage. And you're gonna see as we go through this, there's sick leave, there's injury leave, there's vacation leave, holiday leave, which they can now use their holiday, they used to get holiday pay, now they can use that for time off. At the same cost, there's a formula we use. So again, most of those funds now are being used to backfill that position if a firefighter takes time off. So about 1/3 of my overtime, or 1/3 of overtime use, is for shift coverage. That's a larger portion of it. The next large portion of overtime is when we're busy from numerous calls, fires, storms, mutual aid to other towns, whereby we need additional help with firefighters off duty to come in. And that's on an hour-per-hour basis. and we're a busy department, there's a lot of that. This goes on daily. And I have 2 ambulances in 1 engine typically, and if both ambulances are at the hospital, I'm down to 2 firefighters. Another call comes in, we've got nobody left. So I have to kind of bring a couple more to man another engine, if you will. If there's a building fire, 6 firefighters are not enough to handle that. It's a skeleton crew. We're able to get an initial attack there. We need the off-duty help. The storms with the numerous wires down, motor vehicle accidents, instantly we can get flooded with calls, and I have to bring firefighters in to stop many of this. So that's where a large portion of the overtime goes as well. The last third, and these are not equal thirds, but the last type of overtime we use is really for training, and that's either for the on-duty shift to be taken off shift and not available to go training. Like if we're doing an ice rescue drill, for instance, it's difficult if everybody's literally in the ice. They're not really in service, to be honest with you. So we do training with that. Or if firefighters are off duty, they can use a portion of their allotted training time to like go to the Mass Fire Academy or, an approved course like that. So in some of that's, it's a balance between on and off duty just to maintain those 6 members, if that makes any sense.
Sounds pretty efficient.
It does, yeah.
We actually are very efficient with this, and as crazy as these numbers look, in comparison with some area departments right next door to us, they have 2 and sometimes 4-hour minimum callbacks. We're hour for hour, and it's very efficient because we're extremely busy. If we had a 2 or a 4-hour minimum callback, you'd be doubling or quadrupling my call time, overtime requests, which, and even the firefighters union, I think they get it. I think they understand just how large that number would be. And to be honest with you, right now it's working. It's very efficient. We're only hour for hour. You get an hour's overtime for an hour in there or whatever.
Yep.
If it goes over than that, obviously they'll get paid more for that.
Yep.
But they're not getting a 2 hours or a 4-hour overtime for 1 hour's work. That is out there, but not in Abington.
Sure.
So, or at least not my department. So on page 1, if you want to just go line by line or page by page or however your board wants to do it. The first one is, and actually before I get to
I'm
that,
just checking you just because
Sure.
the increases
I'm sorry.
with the enterprise.
Okay,
Okay, so if anybody has any questions.
no problem. I present my budget and then I hand it to Rick and Sue and they they crunch the numbers, they work their magic, and Sue is going to allot some of this back and forth with the ambulance enterprise fund. I don't always see that going on behind the scenes, and I think that's what you're talking about, so.
Well, and I know I'm assuming, for example, looking quickly at the overtime budget, which is about 150% of what it was previous year, that's from the combining, taking away of the ambulance enterprise account and adding it into the regular budget.
Correct.
So for especially the newer members, previously the fire budget and the ambulance budget were separate. And the ambulance budget was being paid out of the enterprise account. And we've talked a few times on this about how we were essentially told to put it back into the general budget.
And this is the first year that it's
So
like
this
that?
is the first year we're putting it into this budget, so some of the comparisons.
Which means town meeting needs to vote out the enterprise fund,
Correct.
just so we're clear. And then we're moving it into the general fund, because the DOR recommended it. So they just continuously saw a decline, and it happened after the grant ended, and we needed to move the firefighters or the ambulance personnel into the enterprise fund. And over time, you could see that it's just not being self-sufficient over what we're getting for revenues. Not that much of a big difference, but enough to say you can't keep having an enterprise fund.
Most towns, most communities that do this, that operate in ALS ambulance, the revenues brought in from the ambulance it offsets the overall fire department budget, as opposed to trying to make it fully sustainable, because that's a tough one to reach.
Right.
And we've kind of always done that, and it's it tends to stray away from that sometimes, just for a number of reasons. We present, or I present to the town, what our anticipated ambulance revenues would be, and that comes from our ambulance billing vendor. And they're very good with that, and they tend to be conservative with that. But any changes in demographics, it's kind of a crystal ball, and that doesn't necessarily make it correct. So some of that was trending off a little bit, I think, and they were trying to be conservative, but just every town's different. The demographics are different, meaning different residents have different insurance policies, different coverages. The demographics in Abington are not like the demographics in Norwell or Fall River, or, just, we're all over the place. We could have very similar communities. Fall River's not similar to Abington, maybe a Fairhaven, but our demographics could be way off, and that reflects the ambulance. Typically, the entire fire department budget was really two parallel budgets simultaneously. About 2/3 of the budget was funded just from the general tax rate in town, and a third of it, roughly, it's probably the percentages are rough, was funded strictly by the ambulance revenues coming in. And we would predicate that budget where, it actually split it down to, like, the first 12 firefighters are funded by the ambulance, and the remaining 15 firefighters, whatever number is, are from the general. And we did the same thing with the sick time, the vacation time. Sue would make those changes to kind of reflect how it would all work. So again, by removing the ambulance enterprise account, which makes me nervous, and I have no control over this, but I have total confidence in Sue and Rick
Department
and
of
the
Revenue.
board. As long as we get the bottom line,
It's
that's
definitely
really what we're-
Department of Revenue, but,
Recommendation by the DOR.
right, it's by the DOR.
Recommendation, yeah.
And as he's saying that we're moving these expenditures to the general fund, we're also taking those revenues and throwing them into the general fund. So we're not saying we're
Right.
still putting those revenues over here,
Right, so like, yeah, it's self.
So, they're still offsetting, but,
One of the things to mention for some of the newer people, again, for people at home, you mentioned the grants coming off. And so one of the things, several years ago, the chief had gone out and gotten grants to help us bring staffing levels in the department back up to where we were trying to get them. And it also helped to staff up the ambulance and be able to run 2 ambulances.
Correct.
Which was sort of 2 birds, 1 stone. Get the department staffed up, get the ambulance staffed up, bring in more revenue from the ambulance. As Sue mentioned, when the grants ran out and we are now paying the full amount of those salaries, benefits, et cetera, from the general fund or from the ambulance funds, in specific from the ambulance funds, that's where the balance for the ambulance fund starts to go down. And that was definitely a question that we, as the finance committee, had, was how would that affect and how would things look as we went along, first taking on the grants and then when the grants came off.
The SAFER grant, it was a FEMA grant that we got in FY 2013. That allowed us to hire 4 firefighter paramedics, which brought us from a shift strength of 5 up to 6. Now, what that did was 2 things. It's win-win. It allowed us to operate a second ambulance, which would then bring in revenue, which we were hoping that would pay for itself when the grant ran out. We came very close to it, but when the revenues in general started trending down a little bit, that's kind of where it hit. The benefit for the fire and the safety is we also now, every piece of apparatus, we're paired up. We used to send 1 person out alone in the ladder truck. Now we have the tower truck, but same thing. It's communities around us are staffing theirs with 4. We were staffing it with 1, going to the same type of, it's just too dangerous. Regardless of the type of emergency going out there, a simple wire down, or a building fire, or a medical emergency, 1 person's not a team. We're a first responder, however, so by having those 4 firefighters, and it's 1 per shift, we have 4 work shifts that do this. 24 firefighters divided by 4 groups, that's how we get the 6 on shift at all times. So that brought us from 5 up to 6 and allowed us to pair up that other firefighter both in the ladder truck and also with the ambulance. They're more busy with the ambulance, to be honest with you, which is good because that brings in more revenue. But now when the fire hats are on, they're going out as a team as opposed to just one going out, which was a great practice to end because that really was dangerous. So it's a win-win, but now it's just making it sustainable. So the first page, this is all just the general annual salaries. And it's listed as, it's the employee number, I don't have the names here. It has their title, like the first one is FFEMTP. That's a firefighter, EMT, paramedic. Everybody in the department is a paramedic except for myself and one senior firefighter. We're both EMTs. Everybody else is a paramedic, regardless of rank. You see administrative assistant, you see a deputy EMT paramedic, captain EMT paramedics. If you go down that list, that explains who, what position that is. And the salaries on that are all comparable. However, the changes, even when you get changes between firefighter, paramedic, and you're gonna see different salary changes even amongst that group, is the same with a captain paramedic. And that's according to that contract. It takes into consideration how much longevity in the department they have and how much college education they have. And those are the two things that really make the difference in these salaries. You're gonna see some are a little higher than others. Either the firefighter, or that member, whether a firefighter or a captain, they've been here longer, or they have a higher college degree. That's kind of what the changes in these salaries are, if that makes sense. So that's the first page. If you have any questions on that? And again, this is just their annual salary. The second page, this is the overtime budget appropriation, and I kind of explained in general how that's broken into 3 different broad categories. This breaks it down much more minutely. I can go through this if you want, or if you have questions. Some of these are stipended positions, like an EMS coordinator. I have 2 paramedics that they get extra hours to really make sure that the ambulance training and licensure and all of that is in order. That they're kind of delegated to do that. A juvenile fire setters program, we put aside, it's only 20 hours. And in hours, this is by the average overtime rate. Okay, that you take the average of all of these salaries times time and a half, and that gives me an average overtime rate. And that's how I base the budget on. Now, their overtime rates individually may be slightly different, but the average comes very close department-wide. So that's how I figure the budget. The juvenile fire setters program, that's just a small program that we have. If we have any younger juveniles that are sent to us that they're perhaps experimenting with fires or like that, we have an education program for that to try to offset, to try to stop that, obviously.
Just a quick question on the EMS coordinator thing.
Yep.
Is that like a person, or is that just somebody does that job for 150 hours? That has
Correct,
another
yeah.
job in it.
All of these are my current firefighter paramedics.
Got it.
And this is
I
just
don't know
an
if it
extra
was just a
duty that
person
they
who
do.
came in 150 hours a year.
Nope, these are
Yep.
positions drawn from the pool of the whole fire department, and these are in addition that, sometimes we could have a vendor do it.
Yep.
It'll be a lot more money.
Sure.
On any of these. So a lot of times, if we have like one firefighter who's kind of in charge of the communications and radio, he's good at it, it's his hobby, it's a natural fit.
Yep.
He kind of coordinates all the radios with me. He programs them. If we had to send those out to the vendor, that's a lot more expensive. Actually, so it's actually cheaper to kind of do it, and we have more control over it in-house with all of these positions. Some of these are the SAFE instructors. That's different from the SAFER grant we talked about before. The SAFE instructors, that's student awareness of fire education. These are the firefighters that come into the schools and they teach fire safety from preschool up to grade 3, I think they're doing now, grade 2. We also have some tech rescue activations. We have about 6 members in the department that are in the Plymouth County Technical Rescue Team. So we have to put some time aside for their activations as well as their training. The fire alarm maintenance. We've done a lot of changes with the municipal fire alarm system. The older wired system with the boxes and the poles in some buildings, that is about 99% able to take offline. It's just antiquated. It was expensive. We're relying on antiquated wires around town. Anytime there's a storm, half of the system will go out. So we've migrated away from the older wired system. In this spring, you're gonna start to see the boxes physically come off the telephone poles. It's a bittersweet, they've been there for literally about 100 years, or protecting buildings, but it's not that efficient or reliable. So the boxes that are on buildings, they communicate with the building fire alarm system, and if that system goes off, whether it's a smoke detector or a sprinkler, that would trip our box and we get the signal. Those boxes now are either the radio box system, or they've gone to a private vendor, like an ADT type of a system. I'm trying not to build out the radio system too large either, because I can envision in about 5 or 10 years, that may be going away too. It's gonna begin to get expensive for the town, like this one. So there's gonna be a little change on that. We still have to maintain the radio box system. That's why this budget request is still in there. But this is gonna start to get easier with, we're not gonna have to chase literally wires through the trees after every storm. Which is dangerous too, to be honest with you. I get a couple of guys out in a small bucket truck. I'm not gonna miss that. We've got hours set aside for the department mechanic. Again, we rely on the Abington Highway Department mechanics. Thank God for them, because they're a huge savings to us. These are, some hours that our department mechanics, they're more of a liaison. Just, if something's breaking, they'll coordinate with the highway department. Sometimes the apparatus has to go to a private vendor if it's a warranty issue like that, and they kind of coordinate that whole thing in some small repairs. Contractual union coverage, again, that's in their contract. They get several hours a year to go to their meetings and whatnot. CISM activations, that's critical incident stress management. We have a member that's on the Plymouth County stress team that assists with that. Senior fire education, it's the same thing as the SAFE program, except that's a state grant that is geared towards helping senior citizens. Most of this is an estate grant. We include a few hours with this because we don't have quite enough of the grant to really make it work. So there's still a few hours on here. And again, the emergency callback, this is the large one. That's the main one on this. That is the storms, the fires, and all that. And there's a formula that I use to get to that figure. And it's, the 25 members times an average of 16 hours a month times the 12 months. That's how we come up with that. And this is actually fairly accurate, to be honest with you, from what we've, in experience that we've had. Any questions on this? The next page, this is holidays. The firefighters union have always had, they used to get holiday pay. It's based on, we work every day, every day of the year, whether it's Christmas or New Year's or whatnot. Somebody's working there. So it will be assumed that, throughout the calendar year, your work shift would fall on certain holidays. That this goes back decades. That was in their contract. The last couple of years, the union requested, instead of getting the pay, they'd like to convert that to be used for time off, to increase their time off, vacation time, whatever. So we took the dollar figure and kind of changed the formula a little bit so that there was no real increase in that as much to give them certain days off. And that's what these figures are here. Some of the older firefighters, the more senior firefighters, I should say, they opt to still get paid because it's pensionable, and they're kind of looking toward the end. They'd rather have the pension build up a little bit than the time off. So you're going to see there's a few dollar figures on here that are off on that. That's kind of more of the senior firefighters. It's not many, it's only 4, I think. Any questions on that?
So real fast, so basically 2.4 change million. Is it like the 2.1 plus these? That's really what like the people cost.
What are you looking at? I'm sorry.
If you took the
salary
and then you take the next little. Sorry, I think we have it laid out a little differently, but
up here,
basically just 2.132 plus 307. It basically was 2. I increased it, but 2.4 is some change.
Yeah, that's probably, I don't have the, I'm not sure which figure you're looking at.
It's top of page
He was
44.
combining,
Top of the page.
44.
he's combining the
salaries
salary
and-
line item
Yep.
plus the
Okay, yes.
overtime line
Yep.
item.
Yes, correct.
You
Yep.
said
So
there's
there's a
25
bottom
guys.
line salary line.
Yeah, there will be a
item
bottom line that
Yes.
includes,
there. Right.
Yeah,
my overall budget is split in two.
Yep.
Meaning, the vast portion is all salary, and we're still going over salaries now. The second half is gonna be my expenses.
Yep.
And that'll be that bottom line figure on the two of them.
Sure.
so Greg,
that's
if
it.
you look to page 48,
Yep.
that gets to the bottom of the salary section.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
3.2.
that's everything, the overtime, the holidays, the buybacks, or whatever he might have, including the base salary. So you're looking at
There's
two,
additional sick time.
yeah, you're looking at two right now,
That
but
are coming up that we're still going over that.
And it was, you said it was
Factor into salary.
25 members, 26 firefighters? Total for the force?
26 total, including myself.
26, got it,
Yep.
thanks.
There's 27 in the department if you include my administrative assistant. And again, this large figure is because, like Sue said, the removal of the ambulance enterprise account from this.
Right.
That's why it looks like a large jump. That was always about a
Which
third, almost a half.
does have to be a town meeting vote
Yes.
before we, so I don't know how.
So what if I know,
management's- I don't know how management's gonna take it, if they're gonna
So we
take,
need to order the warrant items essentially to vote out the
That's
to vote
Correct.
the
So do
enterprise
we-
account, or will we vote the enterprise accounts as a whole? Or will we
Or do
vote
you-
that one out
think-
separately before we vote the budget?
or do you vote it out in special town meeting?
Okay, I wasn't sure if we could do that in special or if we.
Vote
had
it
to
out
do
in
that.
special, so then when you get to annual, you already have your budget set.
And I know you're thinking about the menu of revolving funds too, so it wouldn't,
Yes.
that wouldn't affect it, but it would
Okay.
take care of it at the special town meeting.
Yep.
Assuming the people voted, but I'm not sure the Department of Revenue would be too happy if they didn't.
what, this is a weird question, but what if they say no? What if the people in the town go, no, I don't want to do that? I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't, but
Then we'll have to obviously change,
We would have to change the,
we'll have to go to special, I mean, we'll have to go to annual, but we'll have to have a special in the fall before we go to, set our tax rate and say, okay, we didn't vote out the enterprise fund, so now we have to vote the budget for the enterprise fund that doesn't include being in a negative.
we would have to separate things back
Right.
out.
So you would definitely have to
Out
have a
in
second
way.
town meeting.
Yeah, we would
Oh, that's a lot
have to
of work.
separate
So
them out
hopefully
in
everybody
a
just
way
votes
that
it,
it's.
yeah.
Effectively, you'd have to have special town meetings until.
Before December,
One way or the other, yeah.
yeah.
So,
I'm assuming if it was explained,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, I think we can properly explain.
sorry.
no,
No.
it's an
No,
excellent
that's
question. I'm
good.
glad you're asking. I'd rather get the questions out here, and I hope people at home are watching it, and it may be answering their questions if they have any as well, so. Right, so going back, we're on page, I think 44. I'm sorry, we're on page 45 of the holidays.
We had just,
Yeah,
I
we're on
believe, finished
46.
45 and we're moving to
46. These are the specialist stipends positions. Again, these are all kind of part of having, delegating different members in the department to do certain tasks. This is really that column I was talking about earlier. Again, this is all contractual in the union. And then there's small stipends, but they do a lot of work, which I think actually really saves the town money if these had to go to the vendors to get this work done.
Is this one where there was a significant difference between what was covered in the ambulance account? Because
It could be, yeah, this is.
previous years are significantly less, and I know that
Yeah, so what
had
we
this
previously
special
did is he gave me a budget and I put it, like, he said, these are the people. And then he had his overtime and his vacation and all that stuff, which wasn't split out. But then I took those people and I split them into the ambulance, so now they're back into the
So
general fund.
more
So
of the
these
people-
large increases.
More of the people who were already receiving specialist stipends were accounted
in
for towards
for,
the
in the,
ambulance.
correct, correct.
As well as, I think a couple of these are newer in the most recent contract.
Do you know which are newer?
The hazmat technician, that is a newer one of the last year or two. Some of these, the number of people are also increasing as well, like the infant car seat technicians, that's gone up. We've just got a few more members that are beginning to do this. There's considerable training in a couple of these to do it, but some of the firefighters have taken it on themselves to do it. The CPR instructor, that's another one that I think we've seen an increase in a couple of positions on that. Most of the other ones are held to, there's really just one.
But just in salaries alone, you're looking at about $1.3 million that were shifted to the general fund. If not a little more, I was just like a roundabout figure is $1.3 million.
The next page is the vacation budget. Again, this is, these next couple are all part of maintaining that 6-member shift in their absence. The vacation budget, below that is the sick leave. Bereavement, that's much smaller. That's in case there's a death in a family. And again, these are also all contractual items in their contract. A smaller one is a sick leave incentive. That's if they don't use sick time. That's a very small percentage. I'll stop at that point just with those 4 or 5 there. And again, these are all based on the formulas are in there that you can see how I came up with these numbers. Below that, it says other. This is part of the training overtime. It's called professional improvement time. And each member gets, I think it's 36 hours a year. And again, they can either take a course when they're on duty so that, you know, they'll take time off from work, or if they're off work, they could go to an academy class and get paid for that. And each one has to be approved by me prior to doing that, so we know what they're doing. And they're limited by what they have. And there is a little bit of a carryover. If they don't use those hours in the first year, they can carry a portion of those over to a second year up to that. So that's what that total, those 2 columns are.
Questions?
That note is there. I just added it as an item rather than.
Okay, I got you. Thank you. The next page, again, this is more of the training overtime that I talked about before, and this is broken down as to specifically what it is. There's fire and rescue training. That's the largest one here. It's 25 members. They each get 36 hours of that. Technical rescue training, the JFS training. These are those other little tasks that we do. We also have to provide some training for those, not only when they're doing it, but this gives them the training for that. In the EMS training, that's the other larger one on this. You know, they have to maintain a certain number of training hours to maintain their paramedic. A lot of that was rolled into their base, but there is still some that we still have to take them off shift to train, depending when they're scheduled. So that's the whole training line item. The last one, and again, this is under the salaries, and it takes a little bit of explaining because some of these items don't look like they would be. Like we're getting into protective clothing. And I think how the DOR or whatever, because it's a personal item, if you will, it's part of the salary line item. That's why these are here. You're gonna see protective clothing, and I maintain a budget of pretty much 5 full sets of turnout gear a year, anticipating that at some point the gear gets damaged, you know. Or there's a lifespan, an allowable NFPA lifespan of 10 years now for all the gear. And we're in a good mix of this, so I'm trying not to have 1 year I gotta replace everything, because everybody has 2 sets. In case one set's damaged, they can immediately put the other set on, and they all have to be within 10 years. So this helps me maintain that. So you're gonna see protective fire coats, protective pants, a mask, the boots, the helmet, the entire ensemble, but I break it down, and these figures are current. I get these figures from our vendor that we use every year when I present my budget, just because things change. So that's what most of this is. There's a tuition reimbursement, which is, again, it's contractual. This has to do with their college training on that.
And it's broken down into 2 pieces. So when we first put the budget together, it was
It was
33, but as more people realized that they wanted the incentive, I added the extra line item that has no comment on it for 25,550. I updated.
That's more.
Right, I updated it, I merged it today, and I didn't get you guys the updated budget, but those two numbers belong together, so it's like 58 and change.
This is a spike we're starting to see. We're getting a lot of, the younger firefighters are really beginning to take advantage of some of the college benefits that they have. This is gonna level off in a couple of years, I believe. Like, every town around us has done, we really haven't had this in years. It's been a long time since we've had a lot of firefighters going at one time for it. Usually, there's always kind of been a number, but it's just the way the hiring dates have been. It's kind of been steady. For the first time, and I'm noticing it in this current fiscal year, and I've been talking to Rick and with Sue, just, and I'm watching this closely, we're hitting a spike. I really didn't expect this. It's good they're going to school, but I somewhat overspent what I had allotted for it. I'm taking that out of my budget. I'm making it work this year. I'm trying to get ahead of this. I think we're gonna see this for the next couple of years, and then it's gonna level back down. That's what we're seeing on this, so.
And what they do go to school for, it has to do with what they're doing.
Fire.
It's all
Yes.
fire science.
It's not like, got it.
And
Fire, emergency management, those are really the two main ones that we're seeing.
And
And the benefit is, we're getting highly trained, firefighters like that, but I've gotta account for it, so.
And I was looking through my notes from last year, which are doing next to my notes for this year. And one of the things we did talk about was that it was up.
Yeah.
It was starting to go up last year because younger members of the department
We're
were
seeing it.
starting to
It's-
take advantage. So that's continuing
Correct.
and the upward trend.
It's a good problem to have, but it's a problem I had to account for, so. And that's pretty
As long
much.
as everybody realizes they're getting more qualified people out
Yes.
there to
And we're
service
keeping
them.
them.
Well,
to be honest with
Right,
you.
and then eventually they'll graduate and it's like, it's over.
Yeah, we discussed last week with the police, the impact of not having the Quinn bill
Yeah.
had on the department
Yeah.
and how more educated members of the department benefits the town in multiple ways, and it helps keep people. in the
Retention is
department,
huge,
so.
especially for, obviously for the police, too. I'm not speaking on them, I mean, obviously we want to keep it, but especially for firefighters. You don't see a lot of transfer in fire departments of personnel. We're starting to get rumors of this more because of paramedics. That's a different thing. The paramedics are in demand, and we're starting to see some strange things with that. But in general, firefighters, there's a lot of training, not only what we do to be a firefighter, but you have to know your community. And you have to know where the fire protective systems in the buildings are, the building layouts. That's what's a little different from fire and police. We all have to know the streets and all that, but we get heavily involved into the different structures and buildings in town. We have old mill buildings in town, the new high school. It takes time to learn where all the shut-offs for the sprinkler systems are, how to reset the system. You don't want to lose that experience if you can help it. So you don't see a lot of firefighters moving from department to department as much. That's one of the reasons. The chiefs don't want to lose all that experience. Now, if somebody moves away, that's one thing, but for the most part, you really don't see that shifting. So, and again, the education, it's another reason it's great for retention. It's also extremely expensive to replace a firefighter, paramedic. Paramedics are getting in demand. There's a number of reasons statewide, and we've been tracking this closely lately because we're not seeing it, but area towns are. It's hard to get a paramedic because there aren't that many around, and there's about a 9-month waiting list now to get into the fire academy. Now, you're talking almost a full year or 14 or 15 months of a position being vacant that now you have to fill it overtime. That is very expensive. I'm trying to avoid that at all costs. So, and we have that, to be honest with you, but.
What's different in other towns that is having them trend higher with turnover that is not happening in Abington?
The other towns right now with these vacancies, what they're running into is, with civil service and even the non-civil service towns, the paramedics are in demand.
Okay.
We're not producing enough paramedics there's a number of reasons for that. Just the demand is greater than I think the accredited paramedic schools in the state a national registry system can keep up with. So it's almost, we're kind of looking like sports teams where I've got a good ball player, which team am I gonna go, who's gonna bid for me? I'm seeing area departments are kind of getting into that. We haven't had the issue yet because we haven't had a vacancy. To further complicate it, when you have a fire academy that's, the waiting period to get into the academy is 9 months. That's a long time.
How long do they spend in the academy?
In the academy is about 3 months. So you're talking at least a full year, then there's your own training before you put them on shift. What we've done in the past is especially with the SAFER grant, we hired firefighter paramedics, and before they went to the fire academy, we just used them as paramedics. And we gave them some training. They weren't allowed really to go into buildings, but they could continue with their skills as a paramedic. So that's kind of how we get past it. But since then, the waiting list for the academy is getting quite long. And the academies are trying to work on it. We met with the state fire marshal, the area chiefs last week. They're trying to open up a satellite fire academy in Bridgewater. And they are going to open it up. That's going to reduce that waiting period. And I'm hoping that by the time Abington has a vacancy, through a retirement or whatever, that's going to be somewhat repaired and that waiting period is going to be reduced. Because it all comes down to this table, which is funding. Vacancies are expensive because that position, if there's a vacancy, that's all going to be funded by overtime. So we want to try to reduce that time period as much as we can. I have no fire. I don't know what's going on. Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah.
Whitman has a fire. Okay. As long as it's not us. Apologize. So that's this page, unless you have any other questions.
Other questions on the other benefits section? Any questions on the salary section, as that's the end of it?
Yeah, this whole first portion of the budget's all under the salaries portion.
So if you take all these numbers, right, I'm obviously just taking these numbers as a group, whatever, just compiling, even if you just take you out, roughly it's $123,000 a person. Is that a lot? Right? So now, again, there might be some line items in here that, with department mechanic, I'm throwing those in there, which again, we could probably.
I actually haven't counted that.
Yeah, but I just took all that, whatever it was. I just took the line items. It seems like, I'm not saying that it seems like a lot, as in that it's not worth it. Obviously, it's worth it. But it comparable to is that when you hire somebody in there, I don't know, hold on. Whoop. When you hire somebody in there is $75,000 or $80,000, right? Do you obviously this has some of the insurance, medical insurance, all that stuff built in. Somebody that's hired at 70.
Actually, that's separate.
I know I'm talking about like
Separate.
another line item in here. That's what I'm saying. When you factor all that in, plus the other stuff that you just put in around, is that what we factor in for a firefighter? Like 120, 130, 140, somewhere around there?
I haven't really seen the healthcare cost portion of that, to be honest with you, but.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not cheap to
Yeah.
keep a firefighter
Yeah,
on
no, it's
board,
not
and-
even about if it's cheap.
But when you're.
Like when I hire somebody, right? When I hire somebody, you give them 60 grand. I know exactly it's not going to cost them 60. It's not going to cost me 60. It's going to cost me 78.
Well,
right?
you're
Because there's
not
insurance
gonna
and all
hire
that.
one at 60 because.
I'm just saying.
Depending on their degrees
Yeah,
and their level of expertise.
No, I'm talking about me. When I hire somebody, right? So I just hire somebody that's 60 or 100 or whatever it is. I know it's going to be more for insurance and payroll and all this other stuff. But is that like a normal figure, $120-something thousand?
In comparison with the area towns around
Yes,
us.
that's what I'm saying.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. We're not leading by any means. We're still
That's overtime.
pretty much behind.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's every,
Behind, you're saying.
everything
Yeah, we're
factored
behind.
in.
Yeah, no, I'm factoring in everything. That's what I'm saying. Like, is that like, is it competitive?
Equipment.
We're competitive, but most towns around us are ahead of us,
Really?
to be honest with you. And our call volume is higher than theirs. So, which,
So like,
kind of bargain.
how far ahead are other
Well,
towns?
which
Is it
you
like
you would
100?
almost think that you'd have more turnover in our town. and we
Yeah,
don't,
absolutely.
You know, but.
Well, especially if you staff the way you is. You know what I mean? Like, you think you would have more
This is
turnover.
not hiring a a private employee. This
Yeah.
is so different than that.
Yeah, no, that's
They
why I'm
do
asking
and
so
you-
many questions, because I don't hire them.
Questions, yeah.
Okay.
No, but in general, whether it's fire, police, or actually just general government, you know, Abington tends to be
At the low point.
end of the spectrum in terms of salaries. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
Just saying, we're not Nova. We're not gonna be Nova.
But what, in Noel, is the average like 150 or is it like 130?
Well, I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
Yeah, I got you.
In general, you know, we're on the lower end of the spectrum in
I
general.
got you.
Excuse me, I'm just,
Yeah.
Do you need to go?
we'll
The
finish this
the reason
up.
I ask is
Well, who's
because
gonna
I
second
look,
on file?
well,
No, I know.
Okay, I'll finish it.
That's all right.
I can
No,
finish it.
I know what you're saying, it's just, yeah.
Want me to finish it?
Nope, I'm
You
good.
sure? Okay.
All right, so,
He's got a
Yeah,
second
keep
alarm
going.
fire, so.
I mean, the
That's
next
all right,
few
yes.
things are like,
Yeah.
like you're posted, you know what I mean? We don't really have to go line by line.
yeah, something a little.
Unless you want to, but I mean, if there's like
Right,
other
he's
stuff.
got a second alarm fire.
Yeah, I think that's more
It's
important
not-
than
I'd
the
say-
it's not our
It's
community,
not?
it's somebody
I know,
else, so
but
they're good.
mutual aid.
postage actually is more important than fires.
I'm kind of watching it. Actually, our apparatus hasn't moved yet, I don't think so. The next half of the budget is the expense budget, and again, it's self-explanatory on here. Really very minor increases on these. These are all based on the FY '18 actualities. I'm trying to maintain where we're at. I can tell you, for FY '19 right now, I'm concerned about my expense budget, only because we've had major repairs needed for the apparatus fleet. Now, that's getting taken care of. We have a new engine coming. One of my warrant article requests is to replace, to get a new ambulance, to replace the 2002 ambulances. We're running the vehicles into the ground, and I'm not trying to be facetious, I'm serious. We're operating old equipment, and we're starting to get more breakdowns, both in the ambulances and the engines. Excuse me. The end is in sight. We have a new engine coming, and if we can hopefully get a new ambulance paid for how we traditionally paid for it, I'm not sure how that would work, but to kind of keep that fleet going, we're just putting a lot of mileage on them, and the apparatus fleet's old. So that translates right now to this current fiscal year. I'm getting some rather large bills between, I've got 2 engines out today, and I've still got an ambulance out today. We're maintaining everything. I have 3 ambulances to maintain, 2 in service all the time, and it's working, but it's been an expensive year, just one of those years, so. So if there's a slight increase in a couple of the equipment repair or the vehicle repairs, it's to kind of reflect where we're at, just so you know. There's really no change in these. We can go through these if you want.
I
So,
was just curious.
billing services?
Yeah, that's the same question.
When-
That is
That's
because it was ambulance
Was
enterprise and
previously
now it's
ambulance,
in
Yep.
general fund.
Yeah, you're gonna see, I think, two items that would be
Yes.
on here. One would be the billing services. That's our ambulance billing vendor, that we've had great luck with. And the other's gonna be the ambulance equipment.
Vehicle supplies and all that.
We actually took the lease out of there.
Building
I'm
maintenance
gonna put it in as
budget
capital.
Yeah.
was moved over.
And then
It's not
vehicle
much.
supplies budget, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Was moved
Where's
over,
the
yeah.
ambulance supplies? And,
Is that under vehicle supplies?
budget?
Yeah,
Oh,
because
you
that
just
went up
added
by
to that?
79%,
Okay.
yeah, so it must be
okay,
that, yeah.
okay. Thank you. Again, we kind of reshuffled this recently, so. The only one it goes up, and they're trying to maintain about a 2.5% or 3% increase each year, is the intermunicipal budget. That's Holbrook Dispatch. Excellent, it's like 6%. They're building in Holbrook a physical new structure on this. So, and they've already given me the budget for the next 3 years. There's a small spike that's really coming FY '21 in anticipation of a new building that they're gonna have an increased expense cost in that. Then it's going back to 3% again.
Okay.
Again, just, you know, they're giving me a heads up on that. And again, that's money well spent
Right.
since we went there, so. The ambulance lease, I can get into that in a minute. I've just got a couple of capital request items. Once we're done with the budget, I can explain that. If you want it, unless you have any other questions on this side.
No.
So I have a couple of warrant articles I presented. And at the end of this, I got some good news for you coming too, on a whole different thing on the plus side, to try to offset this whole thing. A couple of warrant article requests. The first one I'm looking for, and I'm glad Sean's not here, because we'd be transporting him in this if he saw this, $350,000 to purchase a new ambulance and stretcher system. I'm not thrilled with this figure, I'll be honest with you. I can't believe what these are costing. However, we're maintaining, or I'm requesting, the larger heavy-duty chassis like we have with A4, which is our newest one, because Route 18 is killing our other ambulances. And what's happening is the physical, the body, if you will, the box that goes on the chassis, it gets racked, and we get cracks in the upper rear double doors. It's a structural defect. If I go back and get the cheaper type of ambulance, I know it's gonna happen. The next 4 years, we're looking at Route 18, it's worse than it's ever gonna be. So I'm trying to make sure that we get an ambulance that's gonna last a good, 15 or 20 years, which is way beyond what most of them do, but that's what we get in Abington. We make them last. I'd rather spend a little bit more upfront and get a strong, robust ambulance, because we've had good luck so far with A4. The overall cost of ambulances have gone through the roof, like everything else. It's just the cost of steel, tariffs, whatever's going on in the world, it's affecting the cost of the apparatus. The engine that we have now, and luckily we got that just in time, that was $600,000 voted last town meeting. If I had to go for that this year, that was probably gonna be about $700 to $750. They're ballooning the cost of these. So that being said, I'm looking for $350,000 for the heavy-duty large truck type ambulance with a stretcher lift system. This is the other thing that's new and required and expensive. We're no longer lifting the stretcher anymore. Now it's almost like a conveyor system that pulls the stretcher up to prevent back
I'm gonna
injuries.
say that
for
should be better
firefighters.
for workman's comp injuries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're expensive.
Yeah,
So it's-
but I mean, maybe it will save us
In the
money.
long run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the hope, at least.
So that's why the
Yeah.
overall cost of that is so high. We did some figures, we broke that down based on some financing. Now, Sonia did a great job with the engine. I'm assuming she'd do a better job than the figures I came up with. And it kind of broke down, if it was a 5-year lease payment, lease purchase, it would be about $76,000 per year. That's where that figure comes from in the expense budget. Hopefully, maybe, Sue or Sonia could do something better with that if it was a reality, but this ambulance is absolutely needed. This is gonna replace Rescue 2, which is a 2002. I honestly don't think the state is gonna allow us to run it again past next year. OEMS, they've kind of given us an extra, they know we're trying to get a new ambulance, and they've given us an extra lease on life with this. I don't think they're gonna certify it again. And that's based on structural issues with the ambulance, the chassis. We're literally putting Band-Aids all over this, welding steel plate over holes in the chassis floor. It's way beyond its useful life. So, and I really need 3 ambulances to maintain 2. That would still give us a 3, which is a 2008, I believe it is. That would be our backup at that point. And that is in the shop right now.
Do we budget for any of this, like during the year? So say we pay it off in 5 years, do we put anything in the budget for like another 5 years to make it to where we can, have more, like our car, right? As a car payment for, as soon as my car, I got done paying it, I still put money in a savings account so I could just go out and buy another one. Do we do stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
This December, or actually this past December, I just paid my last payment on A4.
Yep.
And that was roughly $55,000 a year over a 5-year lease payment. We just paid that off, we own that. So the last 5 years, we have been paying for that. Prior to that, the town really was in a tough spot. We had a couple years without payments, but the ambulance fleet just gets older.
But regardless of not having payments, we do have a capital plan for 5 years out, so it's like, we know we need this.
Yep.
But sometimes we can't afford this, so we might push it out another year. But so everything that the department heads want, they tell us every year, this is what we need for our 5 years out. So we do know that this is expected.
Yep.
The only problem is if we wait longer, number one, I'm probably gonna be down in the ambulance. That's not gonna put us out of business, but there's gonna be more increased times I can't operate 2 ambulances. And then that starts affecting the ambulance revenue stream. The other problem, if we wait, is I think the cost of the ambulance is just gonna continue to go up if you wait, so. And ultimately, whatever the town wants to do, all I can only do is present to you our needs, but, so that's the first request, is the ambulance. The second request would be, I'm looking for $40,000 to purchase a pickup truck for the department. We need this desperately. We need a vehicle, an extra vehicle. Right now, we're running, I have 3 used and decommissioned vehicles that we're trying to run just as an additional administrative car. We have the fire chief's car and the deputy fire chief's car, and we're constantly going. There's times when, if either one of those are getting worked on, or if I have, other things going on in the department, and one of my captains or firefighters doing another task, their choice now is, I've got 3 vehicles, and this request would replace all of those 3 vehicles into a dependable vehicle. I have the old Ford Explorer, which is a former assessor's vehicle. That's '02, I believe. We literally got it out of the junk heap at the highway department. They were gonna put it on a muni bid or something to get rid of it. And I'm like, does it run? I'll take it. And we're using that. And it's in poor condition. I think it's already been through 3 departments, and we're using that as a backup right now. The other 2 vehicles I have are 1985 and a 1986 Dodge and Chevy pickup truck that I got from the former military vehicles.
Which are
They really don't run.
They're
not-
really cool looking.
They are awesome looking, they are. Everybody loves them. One of them's got a carbon monoxide issue that we've tried to fix. It's an issue. I'm
At 19,
embarrassed
you don't have to
say
fix it anymore.
And the other one, we've had constant electrical issues. It doesn't start half the time. All 3 of them are stored outside. We don't have room in the station, and that just doesn't help. If I got a $40,000, and I'm looking for a pickup truck, because I can use that as a utility, after fire, you can put all the air bottles, whatever, in that and bring that down. Right now, we're using personal vehicles. It's not cool. There's liability issues there. The guys are happy to do it, but there's a liability issue. I don't want to send their personal vehicles into the woods for a brush fire. This vehicle I could. So one vehicle could replace all those 3 vehicles. It will be safer, more reliable, which is really the main thing. It's needed. It's just desperately needed if the town's got it. The next request, I honestly wish I didn't have to ask for, but I do. I'm looking for $35,000 to purchase ballistic protective equipment for the firefighter paramedics as required by a new National Fire Protection Association 3000. This is for bulletproof vests. And I brought this just to show you we're not the only one. This is last Sunday's Enterprise. Brockton Fire is doing the same thing. All the area fire departments are getting it. It's basically SWAT gear for the fire department. And I honestly wish we didn't have to get this. We're required to, out of NFPA, they usually have recommendations. This one's a requirement, number 1. But number 2, this is, God forbid, if there was ever an active shooter type of an incident, either in Abington or any of our neighboring communities, including Brockton, we are going to be there. Our paramedics are going to be at the scene. There's no question. This affords them a certain level of protection. We have to train with it. Right now I'm just looking for the funding, and then we'll purchase it. This price is based on some vendors that I've had. Rockland Whitman just went through it. We're all kind of in the same boat. It's kind of the sad reality that we're in today. I've got to protect our people, and it's a requirement as well. So that's what that is. We're beginning to train with the police on, the 2 teams working together, because in theory, without getting too detailed, God forbid if there was any type of a shooting incident and there are victims in the building, we have to go in with the police, obviously, to render care. We want to have a certain level of protection. The police protect us as we go in to render care, remove victims. That's kind of what it is. We're in teams of 2 or 4 surrounded by a team of police to go in to get the victims out. And this is the gear that allows us to do that.
So I know you have done a phenomenal job with applying for and receiving grants. Are there any
Yeah.
grants out there for
I
this?
don't believe so. I don't believe so.
There should be.
And that's not to say that in the future there won't be, but it's,
Yeah.
Well, once again, you have what essentially mandates.
Yeah.
You have to do
Mhm.
it.
So in a case like that, is it even a question? Is it like automatically approved, or?
It still has to be voted on by the town.
Like, is there an option for them to vote no? And if they vote no, what happens then? I mean,
And we probably have to get
There's
it.
an option, but then you have the
Then we have
fire
to find
department,
it
you'd
some,
have the fire department standing back until the police department got there and cleared the scene.
that or we find money from somewhere else. I mean,
Right.
then.
You'd have to
or
probably
you-
figure out the
Yeah,
money from
yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
You'd have to take the money from somewhere
That's
else.
why it's a
and
weird
then
system.
else
It's
gets
it's a
cut,
weird
yeah.
system for things that have to happen.
yeah.
That's how it works, yeah, so you'd find the money, but then you're taking money away from something else.
Right.
I suspect the town will.
The town usually votes how,
The town would have a
typically, well, at least
valid
last year, they
argument
voted
against
how
it, but just out of curiosity.
generally we did for that stuff.
I honestly wish I didn't
I'm
have to
not
ask
sold
for
on
it. It's one of those,
80s truck, though. I still think it's got some life left in it.
It doesn't have to pass emissions.
We're not all that old.
Chief, I believe the town
Yeah, he's
manager
gonna give us,
offered to
he's gonna
trade
give us
vehicles.
2001, Honda, what do you have? You can trade vehicles for the 86. Yeah, the Civic, yeah.
It's basically the same thing.
Can we just repaint one of those old trucks? It was, I mean,
they work in it, we got another in black.
I think they look awesome.
They
Even
are
though you
cool.
do need
I
one.
just wish they were more reliable, it's
Yeah.
it's like rolling the dice if they're gonna start every time we need them.
A 35-year-old truck is not expected to still be on the road, so.
And I guarantee we get a lot of years out of a pickup truck, I'm sure that.
Yeah, I would think. You
several
already got
predecessors
30-something
behind me
years,
I
will
know.
be
yeah.
Replacing it eventually.
We don't have, I know last year you provided a handout with all, like, pictures and
Yes.
years of all of the equipment. We don't have that right now, but I know that I can speak for the rest of the board and say, you get a lot of years out of all of your
We
equipment.
go way over the recommended life expectancy
Yes.
on engines.
Yeah, I remember that
certainly
last
engines.
year, like, there was like a
A
1980
little
something year old
info
fire
Yes.
truck, like,
The
yeah.
forest fire truck is a former US Navy four-wheel drive ambulance where we kept that chassis, cost us nothing, typical Abington. It was a great project for Abington, is what I mean by that. The highway department took the ambulance, removed the box, added a utility body to it. From a grant, we put a brand-new pump, forestry pump system on that, and we're still using that. That vehicle's, you're gonna see a request on that in about a year. It's getting up there. Luckily, the drought's over, and we, knock on wood, haven't had to use it that often this year, but that vehicle's coming to the end of its life too. It's the chassis is starting to sag from the weight of the pump unit. So I forget the year of that, I should know that, it's about a 2000, I think. It's 20 years old, the chassis, or it's a 99. I'm not asking for that this year. The last request really isn't mine, but if I can talk briefly on it, I think maybe either the board or somebody else may request this. It's for $100,000 for a central fire station study. Rick, do you mind if I talk about this, or do you want to hold up?
No, go right ahead.
Okay, well, have you already heard on this or not?
It's gonna be a warrant article, so.
Okay, this may actually be a Board of Selectmen sponsored one. This would be for a study for a central fire station. I made a presentation, some of you may have seen, on kind of the needs of, we really need to do some major work on the fire department for the physical buildings. We've outgrown the buildings, we don't have separate facilities for our, male and female employees. I'm not gonna talk in length on this, but this would be seed money to just get an independent company to come out and just do a needs assessment for the fire department, see what may be available in town. I'm interested in North School, but don't take my opinion for it. I'd like to see a professional study on this. They may say it's great, it's not, the town may not want it. This is kind of the method to begin the process to see where we stand. I can tell you we have major needs in the fire department. We've outgrown the buildings. I would be interested in it, and I informed the town manager of this, that if we were to do a central fire station, it would be combining both stations into one, and then you could free up the two existing stations for surplus. In that building, if we were to do it, I would be interested in including the Board of Health and the building departments within that overall building. Because I think the future of emergency medicine is gonna be much more community-related, so the Board of Health is a natural fit. Right now, we do a lot of work with the building department, both with plan review and inspect, having our fire prevention officer going out with the building inspectors to inspect things. It's a natural fit for both, and that would give you a lot of extra space in this building, which I think you're starting to outgrow too. That's only my opinion. I don't work here in this building, but I'm offering that. If we're gonna do it, I'd suggest let's do it right. Marry put these buildings and these departments in the same building, and you'd almost be getting an addition with this building at no cost, or the cost of what that would be. Perhaps you can move your veterans agent downstairs. Whatever the town would choose to do. I'd be interested in offering that out, so.
I could just point out, last week, the chief organized an internal meeting with some of us as well as some of his fire staff. And we met with an architect who they designed in a lot of fire departments. I think, was that the firm that also did the police station?
Yes, it was, yep.
So, and they described for us, how this process works, and it has to start with a feasibility study. And like the chief said, it's, very detailed in terms of what the needs of the department are now, prospectively, and, they do some site inspections and try to at least present some options for locations. There may not be more than one, there may be five. I mean, we tend to doubt that, so the goal is to be able to, and some cost estimates of what a facility may be after the first two steps. So at least we would get to a point where you could go to town meeting and have some reasonable idea of what the cost of this is going to be.
Yep.
This is just step one. This would be a multi-year process if the town chose that.
I know there's a bidding timeline and a study timeline. Do you recall what that, from top to bottom?
The whole process is roughly a year from if we had the funding on it. And, we'd be looking at, if the town went in this direction, whatever company we choose for this, somebody that's had a lot of extensive experience in building fire stations in this area, which is key. We did talk to one company, and their team did work on the Abington police. They built the police station or designed it, so they're familiar with Abington, but they're also doing a lot of almost every area fire department in the last 10 years, as well as different buildings as well. So that doesn't mean we'd be choosing that company, but whatever company we choose, we just want to make sure that they've built fire stations before, and,
You don't want the Florida station, right?
Station 2 is an issue, so.
What's the impact on the widening project on the station? I'm right around the corner from you, so I see it every day.
It's gonna be huge. We're losing, and I honestly don't know, if you Google, or if you find it, it was the December 18th Board of Selectmen meeting. I did about an hour and a half presentation on that, and I talked at length on that. We're losing a portion of our front driveway, the ramp out front.
Exactly.
I honestly don't know if we're gonna be able to park the tower truck out front.
That's what I'm referring to, exactly. It seems to me like you won't be able
As
to.
well as just
That
the
in
additional,
previous years.
the 4 lanes of traffic, just getting the apparatus in and out every day.
Yeah.
It's, at some point, I'm hoping we don't get a vehicle strike.
Yep.
Was that, the Route 18 thing, did that have to be voted on by every town?
That's the state.
So the state, now, I know this is gonna sound stupid, but can you go to the state and say, did you guys think about this? Is a fire engine right here? Like,
I think
Have
it's
you ever
eminent
gone-
domain,
have
they
you ever
just
gone to
take
the
it.
state for
Yeah.
anything?
Just to give
What?
you,
What'd you say?
Have you ever gone to the state for anything?
No.
it's an excellent question, and just to give you an idea, they
No.
were beginning to do work directly in front of my station in January. Now, the work is coming, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I have asked them from day one, I said, please don't do it in the winter, because if I have to relocate my apparatus for the day, because we can't come and go, I can operate out of Station 2 or somewhere else, but I can't do that in the winter, because the trucks are gonna freeze up, especially the engines. It's all plumbing throughout the engines and the tower truck. If that is outside in, freezing weather, I'm gonna damage the vehicles. They literally showed up one day and said, we're working fine. And we worked around it. I had several meetings with them, and now they're starting to give me more of a heads up. Oh, next week, we're gonna do this, whatever. With the weather right now, it's backed off. I haven't heard from them, but it's been difficult. The next 4 years are gonna be a challenge. We're gonna make it work, but when they're doing this in the middle of winter, it's beyond an inconvenience. It's dangerous to the.
Oh, that whole road's a mess.
And if you have looked on the state's website about the plans for the project, it is 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Project.
yeah, but it is crazy. It's a long
And they're
time.
like doing the new bridge, I mean, it's huge. It's a long stretch of road.
So one last thing I have, this is kind of some good, unless you have questions. This is
So,
kinda-
before we
Go ahead.
get to
Yep.
good news, when we have discussed the ambulance with Rick and Sue in previous meetings,
Yep.
one of the questions that was asked was, if the ambulance enterprise account was sort of consistently losing money or decreasing in money to the point where the Department of Revenue is having us remove the enterprise account and go back to the budget. Have we evaluated if it makes fiscal sense to take one ambulance off and only run one ambulance?
I have to do the numbers on what that impact would be. I think that impact would be much larger than the loss of revenue that we do. I mean, prior to running 2 ambulances, we were losing a massive portion of our ambulance revenue, just our area towns.
Yep.
Rockland, Whitman, and Holbrook made out very well. Once in a while, we still do that. If we get maxed out, if we have 3 medical emergencies, or a motor vehicle accident with numerous patients, you may still see Rockland, Whitman, Holbrook come in. We have no choice. It's drastically reduced from what that was. And initially, going back several years, I think we estimated it was close to almost $200,000 we're losing with that. I have to look at the figures again, because, I don't want to go by that, but that was, I think, the ballpark we would be looking at. I think we're busier since then, so I'd have to look to see how many times our second ambulance was available to respond and kind of figure what that formula would be.
Yep.
So I'd have to do research on that. I don't think we're there yet, to be honest with you. One of the things I was going to say, and this helps, and I just got confirmation today, not on this figure, but the last few years, we've done a reimbursement project with the state on getting some funds back from Medicare system that
Mass Health
Mass Health and like
was
that.
actually my next question.
Yep, and I got confirmation today that, we finished the vetting. I was doing some work adjusting this back and forth, working with the state, and it appears we will be getting back $127,000 for FY18, which is the most we've ever got. It's $127,236. Now, that figure, that's the figure that we came up with that it appears we're eligible for. Whether we get that exact figure or they maybe decrease that somewhat, which I think they've done in the past. So I wouldn't go spending this yet. But it looks like that's what I have, after doing all of this work, that's the figure I came up with, that potentially we could be getting a reimbursement of $127,236 for FY18.
Just as a comparison, my note from last year was that we submitted a refund request to Mass Health, and we were hoping to receive $22,000.
That was 88. I think last year was 88.
Maybe it's
If I
80.
recall, we're pretty much close to 88 last year.
You know what, I think it's 82.
Yeah, maybe it was 82. It was in the 80s, I know. Or it could
That
have
scribbling
been,
was
it
not
could have been 88, and it was reduced to
extremely-
82, but it was definitely over 80,000. In the year prior to that, I think was 75. So
That's
we're
excellent.
doing well. And again, that's the difference in demographics and, for each year for it to trend, we're just busier. So that goes back into the plus side. Now, I don't know how many years they're gonna continue doing this. We're certainly trying to do our part.
We talked last year, you were putting in for a FEMA grant request for almost $80,000 for life-saving equipment.
And we got that. Yep, correct. Thank you for bringing that up. I also got that. I think it was 80, I want to say 87,000, thereabouts. And we got that. We've actually got most of the equipment, and it's going to be perfect timing for the new engine, which we're going to have room for. That included, I think it was 4 sets of combination jaws, spreaders, and cutters. Heavy airlift bags. They look like heavy rubber pillows, and they inflate. And just different wedge-type blocks for if you have a rolled-over vehicle or extrication. And we can put this on multiple engines, not just the frontline engine. We can kind of, and we've spread these out on several engines. So again, we got that, which was successful.
Does anyone have other questions, things we want to ask the chief about?
No, I'm good.
I gotta go to Whitman.
All right.
See, they're gonna throw me on fire.
Chief, thank you again for your time.
Okay, again,
Thank
anytime
you.
you have a question, but you know how to reach me,
Yep.
any of you guys, if you wanna come see anything we have, or by all means, the door's always open, so.
Okay. Great, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck with the fire.
Yeah.
It's not, luckily, it's not our town.
So,
Thank you again.
moving into the rest of our meeting, just a quick check. I'm not expecting anything. Any changes to the status of the draft budget?
Well, the only thing I'll say is, before your next meeting, we will have a budget scenario, a balanced budget scenario. Again, you might not like it, but it's, as you all know, I think that the reimbursement that we had hoped for in terms of what am I trying to say? The school assistance.
Full-day kindergarten.
Full day, yes, from full-day kindergarten, thank you. The Chapter 70 funds strongly reflected what we had hoped. As you know, last year we went out on a limb a little bit, so that is a huge step towards actually, again, having a scenario that's not all that difficult. Well, no, that's not the right word. It's not Armageddon. Getting back down to level services. But that doesn't include yet building back some of the wants, per se, whether it's, staff, DPW staffing. So there's still work to do, but at least, a scenario, hopefully that would be starting with that's a little more realistic. So that'll probably be, again, next week, 2 weeks, whatever.
2 weeks is our next.
That's all I have.
All right. Any liaison reports?
No?
We do not have correspondence tonight. We do have 2 sets of minutes to vote on. Last week, we held off voting on the January 9th because we didn't have 5 people here to vote on them. We again do not have 5 people here to vote on them that were at that meeting, so I think we'll hold off on voting on the minutes from January 9th and February 6th.
I wasn't here January 9th.
I wasn't either, so I don't know.
It says I was I really think I was here. I've only missed 1 meeting. I missed last week. I really think I was here. Because Greg was supposed to take the minutes, right? And Russ ended up taking them?
Yes.
I was here. It says I'm excused. I just realized that when I was just reading it over, but I
So we have a
was.
flaw in the minutes of January
Yeah.
9th.
Yeah, no, because Greg was supposed to
There is
take
an
them because he was
issue.
the secretary, right?
There is an
So I
issue
was
with the
definitely
minutes.
Need to take that up with the secretary?
And wait, wasn't Sean Tyler here too?
Not for that one.
No.
Then maybe I'm thinking of a different one?
Yeah, probably. Because I take really good minutes. Or really good ones.
I really think I was here, but I don't know anymore. I might be wrong.
We can amend,
I could be wrong. Now I don't know. I guess we'll have to watch the tape. No, I'm just kidding. Huh.
we'll amend the minutes to include Renee.
Well, the vote has to be vote to approve amended minutes.
Correct. So,
I could be. Oh, now I'm nervous.
do we have any motions about the January 9th Finance Committee minutes?
Yeah, let's vote on them. Motion
you
to
saying
vote?
Motion to approve.
Approve the amended
minutes for
minutes.
January 9th?
for January 9th.
We got it.
There you go.
In a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes?
On January 9th, no.
All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from January 9th?
Okay.
Those opposed, it is unanimous. And then the February 6th minutes, we will again hold off on
Yeah,
those.
that I was
You were
definitely
definitely
absent.
not.
That I was definitely not here. Now, I think, I'm pretty sure.
And then just a reminder that our next meeting is not next week. It is 2 weeks from now, February 27th. We'll be meeting with the DPW. Greg will be on high alert,
I'm always on high alert.
You only missed one meeting?
so. And with that, are there any other points of discussion? Anything anyone needs to bring up? Any motions?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
There's a motion to adjourn and a second. Any discussion? Without any, all those in favor of adjourning? It is unanimous. We are adjourned.